Hello everyone, today I will be talking about the development and evaluation of a webinar designed to teach coaches about social support and effectively supporting their athletes. Before I begin, I would like to thank my co-authors for all of their hard work on this project. Various coach education programs have been designed to share knowledge with coaches on sport-related topics such as nutrition, team building, and mental health literacy. Evaluations of these programs suggest that they may be effective at modifying coach attitudes and behaviors. These outcomes may in turn support better coaching practices, enable more positive relationships between coaches and athletes, and enhance athlete sport experiences. When developing coach education programs, it is important to consider the mode of delivery. In-person delivery is common, but may limit the number of coaches who can access the information to one geographic location. Therefore, there are many benefits to exploring alternate modes of education delivery, such as online formats. Online education programs are more easily disseminated to a wider group of people and allow individuals to participate at a time that is convenient for them, which is especially important for professionals like coaches who work long hours and have inconsistent schedules. An integral component to athletes' sport experiences is the provision of social support from coaches. Social support has been found to benefit athletes by improving coach-athlete relationships, enhancing motivation, and facilitating more positive transitions into elite sport. However, there are a limited number of coach education programs tailored towards the provision of social support. There are also increasing expectations that coaches be taught how to provide support to help maintain athletes' mental health. But researchers have noted that there are limited mental health education programs geared towards coaches. Therefore, the purpose of this project was to develop and evaluate a coach education webinar on the topic of social support. This project was conducted in 3 stages. First, we developed the webinar, then we pilot tested it, and then we presented and evaluated it. When making the webinar, the content was based primarily on findings from 2 research studies exploring support provision to athletes. Additional research was used to supplement the webinar content. We developed learning objectives to inform what information would be presented to coaches. They were for coaches to 1, understand how to use different types of social support to effectively support athletes. 2, understand the importance of self-awareness to avoid potential negative situations when supporting athletes. 3, understand how to foster a team culture that combats stigma surrounding distress and encourages athlete help-seeking behaviors. And lastly, 4, learn how to effectively support an athlete experiencing distress in the immediate, short, and long term. The webinar was an hour long, and the content was a mix of both relevant background information on the topic and practical tips coaches could adopt into their coaching practice. More specifically, the introduction focused on defining key terms, including social support and perceived and received support, as well as outlining common stressors faced by athletes and prevalence of rates of various mental health challenges. It also outlined the potential benefits of athletes receiving social support and why coaches play an integral role in the provision of social support. Section 1 presented 4 common types of social support: emotional, esteem, informational, and tangible, and examples of when these may be used in sport-specific settings, and discussed challenges surrounding the provision of social support, including the impact of technology on providing support, perceived favoritism when providing unequal support to different athletes, and coaches determining when a situation falls outside of their scope of practice and providing support would not be sufficient in helping the athlete. Section 2 discussed barriers outlined by athletes that may discourage them from seeking support for psychological distress or mental health challenges, in addition to specific techniques that coaches can use to overcome these barriers, and it outlined for coaches what they can do in the immediate, short, and long term if and or when an athlete comes to them and discloses distress. Following the development of the webinar content, Section 1 and 2 of the webinar were pilot tested separately. Section 1 was first presented to an internal working group comprised of 4 graduate students and 1 faculty member who all study sports psychology and worked with athletes in applied settings. It was then presented to a focus group of 3 university coaches who had coached Olympic athletes. Section 2 was pilot tested with a group of 20 intercollegiate coaches, athletic staff, and administrators during an institutional sports staff meeting. Pilot testing suggested that professionals in both academic and applied sports settings felt the content of the webinar was helpful and informative. Next, the webinar was presented virtually to an audience of 133 coaches and evaluated using pre- and post-webinar surveys. Surveys consisted of 14 Likert scale questions developed based on the COM-B behavior change model and 4 open-ended questions. Quantitative data were analyzed using descriptive statistics and paired samples t-tests. Qualitative data were analyzed using thematic analysis. Results indicated that following the webinar, coaches reported significant improvements in their perceived capability, opportunity, motivation, and behavior for providing social support to athletes. Effect sizes were very large for reported changes in coaches' opportunity and motivation to provide social support, large for changes in behavior, and medium for changes in motivation. Changes in motivation may have remained lower due to a ceiling effect. In other words, coaches who opted to participate in a webinar about social support may have had higher existing levels of motivation pre-webinar, which was reflected in the high pre-webinar scores. In general, most participants had no formal training on the provision of social support prior to completing the webinar and felt the most valuable knowledge they gained was a better understanding of the scope of what constitutes social support, as demonstrated by the quote on the slide. The information was identified as helpful from both recreational and competitive level coaches. While most participants felt the content of the webinar was sufficient, one suggestion for improvement was to include information specific to youth and para-athletes. Another was to provide more opportunities for participants to engage throughout the presentation. As such, future online-based coach education modules should seek to incorporate more audience engagement, perhaps by asking knowledge testing questions throughout the presentation. The findings of the present study are in line with those of previous work, demonstrating that coach education programs can be valuable for conveying information about sport-specific topics. Coach education typically focuses on technical aspects of coaching, such as planning practices and optimizing performances. However, results from the present study indicate that coaches are open and receptive to learning about other aspects of coaching, like social support, and the webinar provided novel information that was perceived as helpful to a wide range of coaches. Coaching skills are often thought to be learned in situ. However, in many cases, including the provision of social support, coaches don't know how to best support their athletes. Deliberately teaching them about skills that are often assumed to be innately learned may have value, as evidenced by the statistically significant increases in coaches' perceived capability, opportunity, motivation, and behavior. Feedback from coaches in the present study may be used to help optimize the development of future coach education webinars. Moving forward, coach education should include a wider variety of sport-related topics, including general social support practices, as well as information specific to support provision of youth and para-athletes. Enhanced knowledge in these areas may improve coaches' abilities to provide effective support to athletes, which may help foster sport environments where athletes feel comfortable disclosing mental health challenges, leading to quicker resource allocation and treatment, as well as improved sport experiences. In addition to introducing coaches to empirically based information on a wide range of sport-related topics, the method of delivery of coach education should be critically examined. While in-person coach education has been shown to be valuable, the merits of online education should be considered. Online education allows for a greater number of coaches to access the content, and by making such education openly available online, interested coaches can view it at a time that is convenient for them. Coaches have identified the time-consuming nature of their profession as a stressor, which may discourage them from attending in-person training sessions. However, online programs may be a valuable tool in addressing this barrier. Further education sessions should also be kept brief, as this will encourage busy coaches to participate. If you are interested in watching the webinar, it is freely available on YouTube at the link here. And here are our references. Thank you so much for listening. I would now be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.